Okay, so let's welcome our first speaker. It is my great pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Avi Bar-Zeev. For over 30 years, Avi has been forefront of XR and spatial computing. He helped launch Disney's Aladdin VR attraction in the 1990s, contributed to what became Google Earth, and co-invented the Microsoft HoloLens, and helped shape Apple Vision Pro. Everyone in this industry would know that's crazy, right? Across his career, he has brought more than 10 hardware products to life. So throughout it all, he has remained focused on making technology better for people. He is also the founder of the XR Guild, dedicated to promoting ethics in XR and AI. So our theme this year is XR Plus from Pixel to Voxel. And there's no more fitting person to open our conference. Please join me in welcoming Avi Bar-Zeev.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I'm honored to be here to give the opening keynote, and I'm really sorry that I can't be in person to see you all and shake hands. I'm over here in Oakland, California. It's not quite sunny, but it will be eventually. And the title of my talk is Reality Always Wins. And these are collected lessons, things I've learned over the span of almost 35 years now, things I would like to share with you that might be relevant to the rest of the day or the rest of your time. I'm going to go through a bunch of different topics, so bear with me, and I'm going to go for about I think we said about 40 minutes here. So here we go. So I started in 1992. So like I said, it's been about 35 years now. And in the very first company, there was a small startup in Seattle, we used the term spatial computing. And we used it because it had been used in geographic information systems to describe using computers to help reason about space around you, mostly for urban planning, cities, things like that. We started to apply that term to VR. And we were building various VR systems, mostly not head-mounted displays, but more like projection environments, things that you would probably call a cave. We called it the virtual environment theater back then because it was all pretty new. And we built this really amazing flyover of the Giza Plateau, and you would sit inside of a gondola of a hot air balloon. And see this imagery around you, and you would have control, and you could fly anywhere. It was just an amazingly freeing experience to be able to just go where you wanted to go and do what you wanted to do, unlike anything you could really do in video games at the time. And moved on since then. That company ran out of money really fast, didn't do very well. I was wound up living in the office for a while. So just take it to heart if things aren't going well. There's always something else later. But it did open the door for me to get a really great job at Disney. And we worked on this thing called Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride. And I have sort of one of the only remaining videos of that later in the talk. I'll show you what that looked like. Managed to work with Disney and Disney Quest, got to work another startup called Keyhole that was bought by Google and was renamed Google Earth. So I worked on the first versions of Google Earth. Got to participate in Second Life and built the code that could create all the primitives in the world, so all the objects basically, other than people, and I worked on some of the avatar stuff too. Got to help start the HoloLens in around 2010, and then I went over to Amazon and we started Echo Frames, which was one of the first what you would call smart glasses. It was hooked up to Alexa, so you could call it AI glasses, although it didn't have all the features today. It didn't have cameras yet. And then I was lucky enough to get to hook up with Apple and to help start the Apple Vision Pro among various projects that I can't talk about. The Apple Vision Pro is the one that is shipped, and I think it's pretty cool, and hopefully becomes a really good development kit for what anyone wants to do in spatial computing. So it's 35 years or so from using that term. We didn't invent it, but we used it, and now it's being picked up by a big company. And by the way, I don't think I ever mentioned spatial computing at Apple, so I don't think they're using it because of me in any way. I think they picked it on their own, but I'm glad they did, because I think it's a really good term to describe what is actually going on in terms of bringing the information out of the computer into the space around you and being able to work with it. Instead of humans adapting to the screen, the computer comes to us. So of all those projects, the most successful actually is Google Earth. because it had, last I checked, more than 2 billion normal everyday users. They're not early adopters. They're just people who are doing fun things. And the thing everybody does in Google Earth first is finds their own home. So that's sort of a mandatory rite of passage for people to say, look at that, that's where I grew up. The real goal for me of this was to build an open 3D browser. So, kind of like Netscape had pioneered, building a free browser for the web, we wanted to build a free browser for the Earth. And the point of that is to build a spatial web. So you bring all the geospatial information together. No one company can source it all, but this would allow us to have a place where it could come together in something like the web. I think it never quite got all the way there. The formats are interesting. There's open standards around it, but it didn't quite coalesce quite as far. But it was still very, very successful. The other projects I've worked on, I'd say they may not have sold or had as many people see them. The reports, I don't know the actual numbers, but Apple Vision Pro reportedly sold 500,000. I think for Apple, those are small numbers, but I think for an XR headset of that power, it's actually pretty good. If you consider that it's at the same level of power as you might get from a Vario or another high-end device, that's actually a really good number. So these things, even if they're not total commercial successes all across the board, they still taught us a lot and we learned. It may not have had the consumer impact, but they were successful in the design and technology sense of being able to set us up for the next thing. The HoloLens is another good example of that, where, today, how many of them are out there, but I think it opened a lot of doors and really, I think, hopefully inspired a lot of people. So you take the learnings to the next thing. Because, and this is going to be the tagline of this entire talk, and something that motivates me a lot is, I don't believe in hype, I don't believe in BS. Reality always wins. So let's focus on what the reality is and try to get there. And of course, the first thing we have to talk about is the metaverse. It's in the news a lot. So what is going on with the metaverse? I'm going to give you some takes, and including my opinions on this. So here's some news in case you missed it. Supposedly, Meta killed metaverse. They supposedly spent $80 billion on it. We'll talk about that more. If you look at kind of the highlighted words here from all these different articles, metaverse, creepy child safety cases. Like, these are the takeaways from these talks. And in the middle, there's Neil Stephenson, who coined the term metaverse. He's even saying, don't use the word metaverse, and those glasses are creepy. So you got an issue when you got the metaverse's biggest proponents are saying, hold on, that's not right. And we need to talk about what's going on here and what went wrong. So why, it's not just Meta, there's other things that failed as well. So Meta, these are takes I got from around, the LinkedIn and other places. So this is not just my opinions, but what I've collected. So I think it's smart to say that Meta tried to do too much with one thing. They tried to compete with Roblox, Fortnite, Apple, Google consoles, but they really didn't nail it on the mobile aspect of it, which they've now pivoted to. That's one of the reasons Roblox was successful, is because it just ran on mobile and you didn't need a headset. Safety, of course, is a huge issue for parents with kids or anybody wanting to not be abused in a virtual world. Utility, and most of all fun. I think you have to actually have something compelling that people want. Rec Room was considered very fun and had a lot of avid users, but then they tried to cram generative AI down their customers' throats, and a lot of people reacted and didn't like it. Maybe that was in response to some other stressor, but that seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back there. The big game companies have laid off a lot of people, and it's not a great time to be a game developer if you work at the big game companies. That was really a result of bad management decisions that from all the takes that I've read from experts. And it was about chasing the profits versus the fun. Really, ultimately, the takeaway is companies should focus on building real value and not so much on manipulation. Don't worry so much about the ads or the alternate monetization routes, although of course every company has to figure out something for monetization, but really focus on providing that value first, and then the other stuff will follow. These are some of my observations, and I think Meta might have been wrong about a few things. First of all, I think an HMD monolithic VR world was never the right goal. For me, this idea of one giant metaverse that is the equivalent of the web, but in 3D, has a bunch of issues. It's not that it will never happen, but there's a lot of things that have to happen first. And I like to talk a lot about this idea of consensual reality, which is a small group of people coming together around the campfire to talk. That's much more compelling right now than trying to link all the campfires together into a giant campfire. Like, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. The other thing is that people spend 90% of their day immersed in their daily reality. And the escapism of VR is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And sometimes we can even escape together. But that's escapism from the stresses of daily life. Let's focus on making people's lives and relationships better. If you really want to provide some value, focus on the 90% and try to make that better instead of trying to cater to the time where people have to escape. Like if we make your real life better, you think about Snow Crash as a book, the whole reason that people spent all that time in the metaverse was because reality sucked. Reality was awful. They had AR glasses. They didn't even use them because reality was so bad. Everybody escaped to the metaverse. And let's not build the future in which the real world sucks and everybody escapes. So this is all to say that the metaverse is not really over because the race to monetize your real life in your face is just warming up. It'll probably be called something else, as we'll see. Here's a tweet from Boz, who's, if you don't know, is in charge of the whole project there under Zuckerberg. And his take is that, oh, the metaverse will still happen. We just haven't really done it yet. And my take is, look, it's not really great to mess up and then go, no, that's not what we meant to do. It's some other thing that we haven't done yet. You've sold it as the metaverse. You've told people this is what you're building and it's not working. I think we kind of need to move on. They bought the name and they burned it. I don't think we should try to spend too much effort to resurrect that name, even though they spent all this money rebranding that. But he is right that all the money, and it's who knows what it is, 72 billion, 80 billion, I've heard, 83 billion. I don't know. But the reality is it wasn't just spent on VR. It was spent on things that are going pretty well right now for them, like the Meta Ray-Bans. That's part of that same budget. So you can't say it was all a failure. I think if anything, it's a pivot. And pivots are normal in startups. It just happened to be a really, really big startup. I think the bottom line is that great XR and AI together need to be personal, contextual. Again, I'm going to hammer on this, safe and consensual. We're going to talk a lot about what consensual really means. I don't think this is Meta's strong point. And we'll see a few media things in a second about that. I think the problem is if we let their ad tech people run this, they're coming at it from a really different perspective than I think a lot of people in XR, then what we're risking is safety, privacy, cognitive liberty, and potentially good jobs because it's just not high on their radar. It's not what they care about. I made this chart a bunch of years ago. I'll give you a second to take a look at it. It is my recollection of all the hype. I think it's really hard to measure this objectively. So don't take this as a scientific measurement of all the different hype cycles. But I think it works a little better than the Gartner hype cycle. First of all, because they keep adjusting it every year. So it's not consistent. I wish they would just say where they were wrong. But I haven't changed this that much over the 3 or 4 years I've been showing this. And the idea really to take away from this is that there's always a hype cycle. It may change. It may be in 2021, the metaverse kind of peaked when Meta rebranded, and then it kind of went downhill from there. And everybody at the time wanted to call their thing the metaverse. But you don't see that today. And now today, everybody wants to call their thing AI. And that's understandable because people are hyping up AI, and not only as the future of work or even the future of humanity, the future of a reality. We may all die and become part of an AI in the future, according to them. Like, I don't think that's the future, but certainly people are hyped up about it. I'm glad that spatial computing kind of was under the radar for most of this time, and Apple resurrected it and brought it up again, but it's not being overhyped. And don't ever let anybody say that Apple's trying to own it, because I think they're just trying to use an open term that is better defined than some of the other ones. If they ever try to claim to trademark it or own it, then I probably would respond to that. But I think they're being pretty good about it. So if AI starts to dip, what's gonna pick up after that? My guess is the physical AI is the next big buzzword. Even though it's got AI in it, if AI really has a bubble bursting, then maybe not. But as of now, physical AI is the next promising one when we see what happens with all these massive data center build-outs that aren't quite working out. So this is the hype cycle, and the big problem with hype, it's just not obvious, is that when the hype doesn't match the reality, which it almost never does, reality always wins. Something comes crashing down. The more you hype it, the bigger the bursting of the bubble. And I'm much of the school, just build it, prove it, and show it, and people will come. You don't have to hype it up as much. And not that marketing isn't a useful, important thing to have, but I think it's often overdone. Okay, so let's switch gears slightly and talk about the pivot. Now we're going to talk about XR and AI glasses. What's going on with that? How are we doing there? Well, we got to go back in time a little bit here to talk about Google Glass, which came out even before the Amazon Echo frames that I worked on. In fact, a lot of the people I worked with on the Amazon Echo frames were refugees from Google Glass. So even though I didn't work on that project, I'm pretty sure I have a pretty good summary of what went wrong there from some of the people who were on the project and from my own observations externally. So let's talk about what went wrong. First of all, think of it as the first version of the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. Okay, it doesn't look quite the same. It wasn't as fashionable. There's been some big improvements since then, but essentially the user experience is the same. You wear a pair of glasses, and there's some stuff you can do. Maybe not by swiping on the glasses, but by tapping your fingers or swiping on your fingers. That's a slightly better improvement, but maybe not quite where we need to go yet. So here are some lessons and takeaways for anybody working in these areas. These are important things to understand. First thing is, don't put ass in your name. I mean, that's kind of a gimme. Like, if you really don't want to be called a glass hole, just like don't call your thing glass. Like, I think that was just, in hindsight, maybe a mistake. But the more important things are, it wasn't really about what was reported. It wasn't really about people going around taking photos. It was something much deeper than that, because even Google, in their instructions, warned, don't glass out. What does it mean to glass out? It means don't be antisocial. Don't take social power away from anybody. So if you're in a group of people and you start acting like a jerk and talking over people or doing things that are annoying to everybody, they're not going to like you. This is a basic tenet of human social interaction. And if you're doing it through technology by wearing a pair of glasses, it's going to have the same result. So the examples of things that are antisocial are staring at people but ignoring them. Like, we don't like it when people stare at us, and we certainly don't like it when people ignore us. So don't do that. And it's happening again. So I think it doesn't necessarily go away just because you have some maybe better UX around cameras. The other thing is, people get a little paranoid when you're viewing information, and it's clear that you're looking at a screen. Whether or not you can see the glow on the screen, it's going to be clear when you're looking at something and your eyes are going up and you're darting and reading something. And people are going to be wondering, what are you looking at? Even though they might not be able to see your phone, they can kind of say, okay, fine, they're just texting. They might get annoyed, but they're not going to get as annoyed as if you were browsing their Instagram feed while talking to them or pretending to talk to them. So basically, non-consensual anything is what it means to be a glass hole, and that is the fundamental reason that people reacted to it. And it wasn't necessary. Google could have addressed this in their design early on, but they didn't understand it well enough at the time. Meta, unfortunately, is making the same mistakes. I keep saying I think they want to have a glass hole controversy because they keep gunning for it. The latest is that apparently, well, the first thing that happened that I saw was, before we get to the newest, was, so a woman was being videoed on the subway, attractive woman. I'm not going to show their faces because of privacy. But this guy was filming her, and she got pissed off, and she came up and broke his glasses. And he wants to find her. He made a big case about it because he put her on social media to say, let's find her to make her pay for my glasses. Like, why were you filming her without her consent? Subway, it's sort of public, but it's a confined space where people have to be in the same room together for a while. And it's not a great place to be videoing somebody without their consent. The nicer thing would have been to ask. So the latest thing that's happened now is Meta. There was a report from a Swedish newspaper that said that contractors in Kenya working for Meta reportedly were seeing videos, maybe just photos of people naked that weren't aware that they were being videoed or photographed. They were seeing sex. And think about it, like, was this people triggering the AI? Were people saying, hey, Meta, during sex? Like, I don't really see that happening. Maybe, I don't want to kink shame anybody, but I really don't imagine that's what happened. It's more likely that the glasses were just recording on their own at times where the owners weren't aware. And if it got somebody walking out of the shower naked, it might have just been sitting on the table. It might have been another person wearing it. It's not really clear. But either way, Meta claims that they had consent to do this, and it's to improve the quality of service. And they also claim it's a private, that these things are private because they're blurring the faces of the people. Like, I'm sorry, I don't consider a nude body with its face blurred to be private. All right, you may be concealing their identity, but it's in their house. I mean, come on, what is more revealing of your identity than taking pictures of your unique location? So I just don't buy that. All right, and now the problem is what's coming next. So in addition to the cameras in front, we are soon going to be adding eye tracking to these devices. Now, I don't think Meta has said they're going to have eye tracking. If they had it on the Quest Pro, The Apple Vision Pro has eye tracking, and there are several smart glasses, AI glasses, that are coming out with eye tracking now. So eye tracking is a real thing. If you want to understand more, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The QR code in the lower right, we can send this out later, is a 20-minute talk that I gave specifically on eye tracking. I gave this at Stanford at a law conference there about policy and what we need to do to protect ourselves. It's all about the good and the bad and what we need to do. So that's coming. But we've had leaks about Face ID coming out. They're calling it name tag, apparently. And Face ID is actually not a horrible thing if it's done right. It's done poorly most of the time. It's done poorly because of the training data doesn't include a lot of people who are not Caucasian males. That's a problem that needs to get fixed. But there are also policy issues about how it's used, that it can be consensual or it can be done carelessly. But it's an important thing to get right because the augmented memory scenario is a good one if we can do it right. If we can't do it right, we're going to have a problem. So here's the leak apparently that came out. And a lot of this stuff comes out because Meta's in so many lawsuits that there's a lot of discovery, and they discovered these things. Sometimes it's just whistleblowers leaking these things as well. So they said, even though this is the kind of a creepy feature, they're going to wait until there's a really horrible political environment so nobody notices that they're doing this. Like, that's not really cool. Now, here's the way that they're probably going to sell it to you, right? They're going to come out and say, hey, especially women, wouldn't you like to know that the guy you're talking to is a perv or a creep? So you're going to be able to look them up, and you're going to be able to discover that that's not somebody you want to spend your time with. But the reality is the people who are going to be using this feature are going to be the pervs and the creeps because they're going to be looking up your Instagram photos while they're talking to you and looking to see your relationship status and what they can say to you to try to win you over. I think you don't want to take this bargain. It needs to be done in a safe way and a consensual way so that the only people looking each other up are the ones who have consented to us. Now, I don't think I need to tell Harvard students about this because two of your students did a very, very well publicized experiment with doxing people in public using smart glasses, and they now have a startup. They might even be in the audience. Hi, if you're there. But I think it's an important scenario to lock down and make sure we make it consensual. So how would you make it consensual? Whenever I criticize, I really like to show the right way to do it as opposed to the wrong way. So here's what I think is the right way to do it. So the first thing is that your smart device with cameras can Face ID, but only people who have consented to it. Now, how do we handle that? How do we exchange contact information today? We bump phones. That's the easiest way to imagine enabling Face ID. Or we could imagine a way to take pictures with some unambiguous gesture. I don't know, maybe two thumbs up. Maybe, who knows what it has to be? It has to be something that couldn't be mistaken for a social gesture, but that gives consent to the device to be able to use your face in the future. Now, once you have that consent, the device can now remember and recall whatever they share. Or maybe limit it if they want to limit it. They might have checkboxes as to what they want to share, but that could include how they pronounce their name. So you could be reminded of that their name is Ian and not Ian, or their hobbies or their hometown, their family. Anything they share with you now could be stored in this augmented memory so that you can feel smarter about remembering it next time you see them and your glasses re-ID them. So it's consensual. People are not going to object about it if they have given consent. Of course, consent requires the ability to remove consent, so that's part of the equation. Now, the bonus of doing this is that whenever we take photos in public, we can now protect all the non-consenting people because we have the Face ID of the people who've consented. So the people who didn't consent, they come through as normal. We don't touch their photos. But the people who didn't consent, we can identify them and imagine using Gen AI to replace them with other people so that now your photograph can be entirely consensual. The people who consented show up normally, and the people who didn't consent are replaced. So they're not even identifiable. And this is only on uploading. I only care about this really on sharing the photos. If you store the original for legal purposes, maybe it's evidence of a crime, that's fine. It doesn't have to be changed immediately. But what matters is how we share these things out. So augmented memory is one example of a superpower, and I like to talk about superpowers. A lot of people like to throw out this term that we're giving people superpowers. Like with all superpowers, if you read the comics, there's the power and there's the responsibility that comes with it. It's not just a gimme. So some people seek to overcome our natural human limits. That's an augmented memory or similar kind of scenario. Other people seek power over others. That's where we need to be super careful. That's the difference between a superhero and a supervillain in the comics. The problem is these power inequities create anxiety and instability and blowback, and they need to be addressed in the design up front. We need to design it to empower everyone equitably. And even if people who aren't wearing the glasses, we could try to think about ways that if I wear the glasses, I'm benefiting the people around me instead of taking power away from them. So here's a really eye chart kind of a slide, and I don't know how much time I need to spend on this one, but maybe I have a few minutes. So if you think about this superpower idea, what's interesting about it is every interesting technology in human history could be described as a superpower. Okay, the telephone, the telegraph, those can be described in the sense of telepathy. They're ultimately leading to us being able to talk to each other without speaking. And if you look at this acquisition that Apple just made, I don't know anything about it, so I'm not revealing anything. But apparently this QAI company seems to be pretty good at letting us speak without speaking. NASA called this subvocalization when they started the research on this in the 70s or so, maybe earlier. Ultimately, it leads to a form of telepathy, which might require some sort of neural implant, but who knows? But we're early stages on that track. Each one of these 6 tracks is kind of like that there's an early version, fire is an early version of omnipotence. You can control energy being released from burning wood to you have power to do anything. There's a big gap, right, between these, but they address a real need. I think the most important thing about these superpowers is for them to really be a superpower, they have to enable us to do something that we couldn't do before, like fire is a great example. It really changed civilization in the sense of we had to huddle and sleep for the whole darkness because it was too dangerous to be out and about. Once we had fire, we could continue to do stuff after dark. We could be warm. I mean, it's just a major change in the way we survived. And omnipotence might not seem to be required, but by the time we get there in 100,000 years, then we'll understand what it's good for. There's dangers, of course, with all these. So these 6, and I don't think I have time to go through all of them, that these are innate human desires to overcome the limits that we were born with, and that we use technology to try to overcome. And we're sort of part way along the spectrum of each of these. The bicycle is part way along the ability to be in many places at once. It just gets us from point A to point B a little faster. But in the future, maybe we have the concept of bilocation, where we can teleport to multiple places, or we can exist simultaneously and be perceiving data streams from multiple locations. I don't know if our brains can handle it, but that's, again, exceeding the limits of biology, trying to understand how we can do this. So there's the left-hand side, there's the right-hand side, there's a lot of gap in between, but this is the path that we're on, and superpowers are the way that we get there, but there is the downside. There's the idea that products could be super profitable also while being wholly unethical. Like, is that possible? Can you make a lot of money while being unethical? Yeah, here's 6 examples. 5, sorry. And these are all things that made a lot of money in their day, but they were really bad for us. Fast fashion, if you don't know, is sort of fashion that falls apart within 6 months. Cheap to make, you don't plan to wear it more than once. It's very wasteful of a lot of resources. And there's also a lot of issues about who's making the fashion. Is it child labor, et cetera, sweatshops. So these are all bad things. And these are things that we have laws, regulations against in order to handle them, because it's very hard when a company makes a lot of money to be able to rein them in, because that's the way our system currently works. A lot of people will say technology is neutral. It's just how you use it, right? It's a hammer, and you can use a hammer to hurt somebody, or you can use a hammer to hit nails. I'm going to tell you technology is not neutral, and here's why. Because the good outcomes require a lot of work. It's that simple. The default is bad. The bad outcomes are easy. If you just don't think about it and build something and don't care, you're going to often get a bad outcome, because carelessness leads to bad outcomes. Good outcomes require work. So the technology is not neutral. It requires us to pay attention and think about how it's going to be used and how to benefit people. So anybody who says that to them, just show them this slide. The bottom line is that great design requires ethical constraints to be built in. And I don't just mean give us your 4 principles for how you're going to do responsible design. That's a good first step, but you got to go deeper. You got to tell us specifically what are you going to do, and promise us what you're not going to do. Promise us that you're not going to use our personal information to do X, Y, and Z. And then hold yourself to it, be accountable. And when we catch you breaking that accountability, you better own up to it. All right. You can't just shirk it and say, you gave consent. That's not going to cut it. We have to be able to trust you to stick to the ethical constraints that you're giving us. So design first for improving human lives. That's a very good design ethic. It's like focus on how we're going to actually help people, not addicting them, which we see a lot of these technologies. Even I use AI coding a lot. There's an element of AI coding that is also very addictive that we're going to need to talk about pretty soon because it looks like it's feeding the same addiction cycle that some of these other things are feeding. Not exploiting people, and then I take using your personal data in ways that undermine your freedom of choice is exploiting you, and not replacing people. And there's a lot of the discussions around AI and robots centers on are we replacing people or not? We should be designing to augment people. That to me, this is the fundamental difference between the school of thoughts around XR and the prevailing thinking around AI. XR is about augmenting people, and AI is for many people about replacing them. And I think that is the fundamental disconnect there. So if you want to learn from past mistakes, this group that I helped start called the XR Guild has a library. It's an open free library that we're hosting online. It's got a bunch of really good articles. We'd love you to add to it, but please take a look at it and tell us what you think of it. Tell us how we can improve it because we have volunteers dedicated to trying to help everyone learn from past mistakes. All right. Switching gears slightly, we're going to talk about some past mistakes here, but we're going to talk about UX. And the first thing I want to say about UX is now that AI is so in the mainstream of discussion, I don't think we should be calling this UX anymore because the AI is often the user. So let's focus on what we really mean here is human experience. So I would really like to get us talking about HX instead of UX, or at least HI. Apple calls their group the Human Interaction Group, so HI is fine too. What makes HX magical and what makes it suck? So we're going to get into a little bit of theory here. I've tried to tailor this so that it includes lessons learned from design and technology, and this is relevant if you're a designer or technologist. It's not going to be too deep, but I'm using some terms and I'm going to define what those terms are as we go. So just to understand basic human communication, just to take a step back, if you've never taken a class on this might be new, but hopefully everybody's seen this. If two of us are standing around a car and talking, we just say it's a car, and the car is there. The context is obvious. We understand what the other person means when they say car. If they're pointing at the car, there's no ambiguity. But what happens when the car is not there, and I say car, and you hear car? We might imagine very different things. This is a fundamental quality of communication: is the word is a very tiny number of bytes to pack a very powerful, big concept, and it doesn't always decompress the same way. So we tend to call these things mental models. I have a mental model of my car, you have a mental model of your car, and these are mental worlds. And these predate virtual worlds, but they're essentially the same idea as virtual worlds. When you have mediated communication, you have your virtual world, I have my virtual world that exists entirely in our brains, in the wetware. And what we want to do is we want to put a computer in the middle, and the computer can mediate. So first of all, the thing that happens that when we communicate is there's a cycle of interaction. I may say car, I may clarify what I mean, you may ask a question, what kind of car? And we eventually, through communication, get to a shared understanding. Oh, that's the car we mean. The computer can do the same thing. So computer-mediated communication can help us, and it requires the computers to also have models in the same way that we have mental models. The computer's also going to need a model. That's what AI is really about, ultimately. It isn't just about enabling the computer, it's about enabling the people. So let's define a few words. You may have different definitions for these words. This is just how I'm going to use these words, and you're welcome to use these definitions or not. It's up to you. But just to be clear about what I'm talking about, I want to define them. So perception, presence, we use a lot in XR. I define it as our sense of being in the world, of the world being real around us. Agency is our ability to affect the world. The last two I'll define a little more clearly because they're not as common. Reflection is that when we do something with our agency, the world reacts as we expected. It's reflected. If you look in a mirror and you don't see yourself in the mirror, the world is broken. Something's wrong. You're either a vampire or something is wrong with the simulation. So reflection is very important. And it could be as simple as you throw a stone on the lake and the stone doesn't just disappear into the water without a plop. There's either a plop or it skips properly along the surface of the water. That's reflection. Resonance is when these things form a positive and constructive cycle. So let's get into some examples of these things just to make them a little clearer. So a video game, a 3D video game, has more perception because you're immersed in the sense of 3D. It doesn't have to always be first person. It could be God's eye view, but we're giving you we're cueing in our natural human ability to perceive the world around us and putting us into the middle of a game to help use those senses and those cognitive abilities to allow us to perceive more than we might in a 2D game. For example, a 2D game might give you a top-down view that might give you a better perspective in some ways, but you're not going to get as rich of a sense of the world as you would in 3D. That's why the reason I think people like 3D games is it engages our senses in a much deeper way. Now, if you make it 3D and you provide this extra sense of presence, that also engages even more of our cognitive facilities to feel like we're in the world. We become much more attuned to it. And it doesn't always require a headset. It doesn't always require being fully 360 immersed in something. So if you've done the Apple Vision Pro demo with the dinosaur coming out of the world, it's just a portal. There's just a hole in the wall that takes you to another place in time. But you're still in your room. You see your room everywhere else. The dinosaur comes to you. You still get a really good sense of presence in your own reality, but you get the sense that the dinosaur is also present in your reality, which is a different kind of presence. You don't always have to be transported somewhere else. And again, it doesn't require a headset. It could be done with projected environments just as well, but it's an important sense to cue in. And I'll give you a hint, the spatial audio is just as important, if not more so in some cases, than the visuals. Because the dinosaurs, the hearing the dinosaurs walking before they even show up is half of the battle of getting you to believe that these things are real. But if you go into a virtual cathedral and don't hear your own voice with the echo that you would expect to hear in a cathedral, it doesn't feel real. And that's one of the hints that I'm going to give you as to how you break presence is exactly things like that. So rich interactions are what give us the agency. So I mentioned I was going to show you a little video. I meant literally, this is a little video. It's very low resolution. And this is the only video that we have left from the Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride. But you can see this giant headset that had to be suspended from the ceiling. But it was an amazing experience, and this video really doesn't do it justice. It was so bright and crisp, and it felt very immersive. Now, the reason I'm showing this under the agency slide is the problem that we had was because we gave you full 6 degrees of freedom control of your magic carpet. You can fly anywhere. We had these characters in the world telling you the story of what you needed to do for this 5-minute adventure. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would stop and listen because they had so much control. They went right by the characters. And normally a Disney ride, you're on rails, right? So you have to hear the It's a Small World story because you're in the car and they pace it for you. This is not a dark ride. This was a ride where you get to go anywhere you want. So we had to redesign the physics of the world and the storytelling to make that work. And this is something every game has to deal with. These are some good examples of games that I like that have showed agency in the world, even with a lot of storytelling around it and various degrees of storytelling. Now, participation, agency, and reflection show up in all sorts of places. You just go to a stadium at a concert and you see the chants and the waves and the crowd cams. Those are all giving you the ability to participate, to give you agency and reflection, even in a non-immersive experience. But immersive experiences have that even more. And user-created content generation is one way to engage people with those abilities inside the world. And there's a good example of the skipping stones that I talked about. Here's a good example of when it works well. You get this idea of flow, that you just get into this natural state where everything just works and you're not pulled out of it by anything. So this is Anna doing her great thing, art in VR, using some, I think, tilt brush probably. And that might be something else. But she just does this amazing work that's mesmerizing to watch because she's so fast and just does these evocative things in one shot that it just the best depiction of flow that I've been able to find. And that's what happens when you have a positive resonance cycle. So just to unpack this one more time, just to make it really clear, you got a human in an environment. The human has a natural cycle that includes perception, presence, agency, and reflection. And if you do the cycle right, you get this natural resonance. And if you put another person in the same environment and they have their own cycle, they get the same flow. And then if you combine these together in a virtual environment or in reality, works similarly. In the virtual environment, the computer has a cycle as well. And I know today you're going to talk a lot about world models, so I want to emphasize this. The point of world models is not simply that the computer understands the world around us. That's superficially what a world model is about. The computer should understand space and time and physics and all the things that we learn and become common sense. But the point of it is to facilitate human-to-human interaction so the computer can facilitate communication. It's not simply to make a robot be able to navigate better in the world. It's not simply to make an app on your phone understand the space around you. Those are true, but the ultimate goal is to facilitate human-human communication. And if you do it wrong, you wind up dissing people. And here's what I mean by that. If you have perception minus presence, if you ruin the presence part, you get disbelief. If you have agency minus reflection, you get disillusion. If you try to have agency minus accountability, you have distrust. And if you do anything wrong, you can break all these things and create a sense of dissonance. And that's the fundamental reason why these experiences don't work. And you need to tune it to make sure they do work for everybody that's going to use it. And it works differently for different people. So that means a lot of testing. So how do I like to do this? The thing that I like to do, we like to call experience prototyping. What we do in experience prototyping is we're all designers and prototypers are all exploring a solution space. So think of it as a giant undiscovered map. We're all trying to iterate on ideas and elucidate things and find things interesting in the map. The difference with XP is it's not about iterating on one idea and then sort of spiraling around it to find interesting ways to solve that one problem. Some designers do that. I think it's valuable, but XP is about essentially breadth first exploration, trying to explore the whole space cheaply. So every prototype should only be a week or two of work. They're very shallow prototypes. But the idea is to cover as much space as possible to understand what's great, where are the mountains, where are the valleys, and what you're trying to build up is a shared understanding of this landscape. And inside of a big company like Microsoft or an Apple, the value of that is you've got a lot of decision makers. You've got the executives at Apple, the designers have a lot of ultimate control over what the products become. And you need to get a lot of buy-in from everybody. So you need to build up this shared understanding to have the confidence that what you're going to do, if you're going to go spend $1 billion on something, it's perfectly reasonable to go spend $500,000 to $1 million on a bunch of experiments to make sure you're building the right thing. So that's what it's all about. It's a great job. There aren't too many of jobs like that, but it's a super rewarding thing because you get to be early in on all these concepts and help figure out what's good and what's bad, and you set the boundaries before anybody starts doing the work. But if you don't do that, and if you choose to ignore all the hard-won wisdom and start over and make all the same mistakes, just remember, like I keep saying, that reality always wins. The last section I'm going to talk about in the few minutes I have left is AI. And I don't call myself an AI expert, so I don't pretend to be the person. I'm not the person who's going and inventing the new AI models. I'm the person who uses them, and I'm typically the person who works with the machine learning experts to figure out what the right thing to do is. And I've worked with a lot of them in my years. If there's any doubt that AI has been pivotal in the evolution of XR, it has been from the beginning. Computer vision is the best example of that, but it's showed up everywhere. I've spent a lot of time thinking about these AI glasses, smart glasses, with or without a display, and how to make that a big part of our lives in a positive way. And I hope we'll see more positive examples of that coming in the future. But fundamentally, this is my understanding of AI. So take of it what you will, but here's my takeaway. AI right now, especially LLMs, are probability machines. So one of the ways to think about it is like a giant Plinko machine. This is a Plinko machine on the right. You drop the balls in, the balls can bounce left or right. And if you drop enough balls in, all things being equal, if the pegs are not rigged in any way, or in the case of an LLM, they're tuned in, the neural network is tuned so that the balls will fall a specific way. But if it's just neutral and there's no tuning, you get this nice bell curve. And the bell curve is just a natural outcome of the fact that you're making a whole bunch of left-right choices. And so the probability means you're going to be in the center. So if you actually provide a prompt with some history and files, whatever, now that's what's going to skew the result left or right. So that's how you steer this giant 7 billion parameter model towards the result you want, was by giving it this input, which effectively, it's not that you're changing the pegs, but you're changing the way the balls come into the Plinko machine to be able to get a different outcome. That's sort of the layman's way of understanding what's going on there. So what does that mean? The most probable result is what you're getting from this machine based on what you're giving it. That's the most common. It's also the most homogeneous, which means it's going to be everything kind of looking alike. And fundamentally, that means it's the most average. I'm using the word average in the linguistic sense, not in the mathematical sense. If you want to be a little more precise, it's probably more like the median of the training data corresponding to your context. So if you look at the graph, the median is that middle box that represents not simply the mathematical average, because you think about it, like the average of five numbers could be really skewed. If you're averaging 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 million, the average is going to be like 200,000, right? Something like that, if I did the math right. If you want to find the median, it's like 3. So the median is a better way to look at the middle of the data. Hopefully you guys can check my math. I just did it in my head, but I did that right. The problem is, well, the good thing is actually here is if you're below average, that's great because using AI like an LLM can boost you up to the average. So if you happen to be a crappy writer or not a very good coder, or you didn't know anything about plumbing, using an AI can bring you up to the average skill of the training data that has been ingested, and that's great. So it's a superpower, right? So that's good. But if you happen to also be above average in something, like you're a great writer or a great coder, then simply using the AI without anything else can bring you down to the average. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot. The exception is you have to add your own exceptionalism. So at this point, this is where the AI experts in the room will object and tell me, wait, but if I'm really good at prompting, then I can absolutely get exceptional results from an AI. And my response is, yes, you're making my point exactly. Thank you. Because you're adding your own exceptionalism to the front end. You're adding your exceptionalism in the form of prompting better, and therefore you're getting better results than the average. But you have to admit that the average person using this LLM who doesn't know how to prompt as well as you can is going to get average results, almost by definition of what you just said. So you're agreeing with me. Thank you. And I think this is really the key, is you have to bring your own exceptionalism. If you don't, then it's a time-saving demotion at best, right? So I'm a decent writer. If I just tell AI to write it for me, then it's not going to probably be as good as I would have written myself. And this is what a lot of the fight is about, because you'll see people saying it's sloppy, you'll see people saying it's great, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's first focus on whether it's always good. So there's examples of where the averaging, the sort of median idea, is actually really good. So if I ask this audience to all guess how many gumballs are in the jar, you're going to get a variety of answers, some high, some low, and that's great. But actually the best guess is going to be the median of all those answers, because some are high and some are low. The median is a really good answer. So that's a domain in which the AI could probably do a pretty good job. And there's a company called Unanimous AI, Louis Rosenberg, who is a colleague of ours, and they're doing a great job using AI for this, which is a human-powered AI essentially to make those guesses. If you ask the AI other kinds of questions like best dating advice, you might get a horrible answer. So if you were to go search for worst boyfriend, you get this guy who's apparently a scammer who's ripped off lots of people. The AI doesn't know anything about this. It's not going to be able to help you on this. And it would be a mistake to rely on its advice if it's just giving you the median answer and not really thinking of the specifics. Our intuition, our natural senses might be better. So your opinion of AR is going to largely depend on where you're coming from. If you're coming from the side of it's a superpower, it means it's improving your ability from maybe being below the median to being at the median, or maybe above it if you use it well. But if you're coming at it from the point of view of I'm a really good artist, then everything else looks like slop, because you're already a good artist. Why would you want this except to maybe save time? So your opinion of AR largely depends on which side of the median you're coming from. Exceptionalism in general can be good or bad or great or horrible. It's never average by definition. Exceptionalism is the ends of the bell curve, not the middle. So I would argue, this is kind of a dumb definition, but genius is kind of what we call exceptionalism with great results, right? It's a bit of a joke. But the reality is, if you want to call something genius, it could have been crazy, it could have been nuts, but it turned out really well, so now we call it genius. Einstein's a great example. People thought he was stupid for a long time. They thought he was nuts. They didn't agree with him, but it turns out he's a genius. He's been a genius all along. He was a genius the whole time. It's just that not everybody appreciated that. So I would say it's good to be exceptional, but not in every way. So what we think of as sociopathy could be described as exceptionalism at the expense of others. So the people who built the pyramids probably enslaved a lot of people that were killed. And not only we're pretty sure that they killed all the servants of the pharaohs who were buried there, Maybe they convinced them that they were going along with them to the afterlife, but it was exploitive for sure. Slavery, building the canals, sweatshops. We've always done this where we have somebody who I would call a sociopath exploits a large number of other people for their own exceptionalism so that they can say, I built the pyramids or I did this. And maybe the end result is beneficial. The Panama Canal is beneficial to humanity. You know, you could argue that slavery contributed to the construction of this country. And the country overall, we'd say, is a good thing when it does good things, not all the time, but slavery is obviously really bad. So when bad things result in monuments, we have to remember how they were built and the cost of those things. So my takeaway for you is be exceptional, but in a good way. Focus on how to do it the right way. Everybody should try to be exceptional. If we're trying to figure out how to survive in this world full of AI, I think the answer is to be exceptional, but do it in a good way. So my final slide is, whatever the hype, whatever they might claim, reality always wins. And just figure out what that is, and you're going to be good. And that's my talk. Thank you.
Avi, do you have time for maybe one question from the audience?
Sure.
Okay. Anyone wanting to ask any questions? No? Okay. Okay. Is expertise, sorry, can you, repeat your question? Yeah.
If you are using AI, do you need to be an expert to correctly spot hallucinations by the AI?
I would say, I mean, there's tools that you have if you're not an expert. I mean, you can. Here's an example of where hallucinations should be easy to spot. It should never happen that people publish papers with false citations. The whole point of the citations is there's a public database, multiple public databases of papers that have actually been published. So all you have to do is check. Now, that requires a little bit of expertise. You need to know that there's a database of papers that you can check. But if you're an academic, hopefully you know that these papers exist and you can at least see the abstracts. And so if you're writing a paper and using an AI and it comes up with BS papers to cite, that's on you to go check and make sure. So yes, a little bit of expertise. I'd say lawyers additionally need to do this extra due diligence to make sure that any AI they're using to help them in writing is not making things up. It is a natural outcome of the models. The models will hallucinate. It is not, it's a flaw from our perspective, but it's inherent to the way the models are built. Now, you do need to know something though. If you're a coder and the model is saying that it did something and you're like, I don't think you did that, the thing you just said you did, yeah, you need to be a little bit of an expert to call BS on that and say, no, go back and do it right. And if you're using AI for coding, I promise you, you will need to do this because the AI will often lie about what it did and not understand it because it only has a very small context window. You have a much bigger one right now. Someday its context window will be bigger than ours, but right now it's very small. So you have to keep reminding it of things. And putting things in files is the way that we do this today. We write these little MD files that contain all the things it should remember, but it can't keep it all in memory, so it is going to mess up. You got to be on top of it. You have to really pay attention to what it's doing and not just hit okay. You're going to get very mediocre results if you just say okay all the time. I think is the reality of it.
All right. Thank you so much, Avi, for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.